Hi everyone, welcome. So glad that you're all here today. It's wonderful to see you all. I'm just going to do a brief welcome and then we'll do some group intros and dive into our panel. So I'm Jody Chang, serving currently as the Interim Executive Director here at SV2. And I'm also a partner, so enjoy having both roles here. And so that you all know you're in the right place, this is our Pathways to Opportunity, our third learning session. This one will be focused on career pathways and workforce development. We're thrilled to have a wonderful panel here today. And we'll turn it over to Linda.
The way we chose this topic called Pathways to Opportunity was there was a real deep desire within the partnership of SV2 to really understand what was happening with poverty and inequality. Obviously, it's a huge national issue, but it's quite frankly, as we all know, a really huge Bay Area issue also. So there was a real desire to understand that more deeply and what the root causes were for why we are in the situation we're in. But then also, as we know from people that have been part of our partnership, there was a real desire to then also understand, well, what can we do to really make a difference in those areas? And so we have been looking at these evidence-based approaches. They may be evidence-based or evidence-informed, but really looking at approaches that seem to be having the biggest impact on that issue. And then another big thing that we wanted to do in this learning session and then a grant round is look at it in a really comprehensive way. So there's a tendency in some cases to just look at just career pathways or just education or just affordable housing, but we really wanted to take a look at this from a whole system approach. And so that's sort of the context for what led into this whole learning year and grant round this year. Oh, thank you so much, Jody.
Oh, I have to go back.
Go back one. So I won't spend a lot of time on this slide, but this is really just a, sort of a visual depiction of how we've just tried to comprehensively define the landscape. And so we look at it from the point of view of some basic needs, and affordable housing, of course, in this area is one of the biggest drivers of all. And then there's the whole pathway through either education or there's a pathway through workforce development and career. But we realize there's a lot of overlap and intersection between those. And so this just acknowledges the fact that, again, even though there's great initiatives going on in all three of these circles, there's also a lot of overlap starting to occur in organizations working in multiple areas because of the need to have individuals. The individuals are obviously intersecting across all of these. So many times what we've done in the past for our biggest grant years, we've just done a grant year all year, but because this area is so big and we had so much learning to do, we've done something different this year, which is the whole fall has just been dedicated to learning. So this is the third of 3 learning sessions. Today is the workforce development and career pathways, but we had a kickoff panel and then an education one about a month ago. And for those of you that are new, I just want to let you know we did record all those sessions, just like we're recording today's sessions. And so if you are interested in going back and hearing either audio or we even videoed them, you can totally do that if you're interested. And they're right online for you to take a look at. And then Alice is going to talk about this at the end, but we've got a couple of volunteers, and I'd love to have a couple more if you're interested, but we're going to have a smaller group of people really then take a look at what are the types of organizations that map to these high impact areas, and so a way in which we can do some offline research. And then a really important meeting that I just want to make sure everybody here today puts on your calendar is we're going to have 2 meetings in early December, which are going to be decision meetings. So one is going to be December 5th, which is a Tuesday during the day. We'll serve lunch like today. And another for people that can't make it during the day will be a virtual meeting in the evening. And we're doing both of those because we want as many partners from SV2 who can attend to attend either one of those. And we're going to be doing a couple of things there. We're going to be looking, first of all, at the overall learnings from the fall, what the research team has uncovered of some organizations that map to those. And then most importantly, we're going to be making a set of decisions as a partnership about which couple of those areas we want to move forward into a spring grant round. And we'll be kicking off that spring grant round in mid-January, and it'll be running sort of through the end of the spring. Okay, so with that, Allison's going to come up at the end and talk more specifically about next steps. But with that, let me go ahead and turn it over to Lisa and to kick off our amazing panel for today.
Well, you've already heard a little bit about each of these folks with regard to their early career trajectories, which very much relate. So I will do a brief introduction. Just you have bios on the table, and then there's certainly much more online as well.
but just to ground you on who you've got, we have Steve Levy here, who is distinguished and has been, as he said, doing the same work for 50 years. So he knows his stuff. He's part of, the principal and founder of the Center for the, I always get the sequence of these words mixed up, but the Center for the Continuing Study of the California Economy. And I think that says a lot. You'll hear more about what he does and how he does it, but I think he will ground us in what we're talking about today and a lot of the realities, numbers and otherwise. And a fun fact about Steve, 3 fun facts actually, are 1, that he has never driven a car. Number 2, he has a brand new 2-week-old granddaughter named Daisy.
Wow.
And third, he is, I was so excited about all of them, I'm giving you them all quickly. And the third is that he is a very top-level bridge tournament player. Was. Past tense, was. He's busy with other things now. Yes. And then Judy Miner, who is the chancellor of the Foothill De Anza Community College District, is here and has obviously spent her career focusing on how to provide opportunities in education and on into the workforce for a variety of populations, and does that both within our district here, but also statewide, and you'll hear about that. And a fun thing to know about her is that I love the way she phrased it. Should training and ability not have been an obstacle, being in the training business, she would have been an opera singer. So she's not an opera singer. However, Judy has, since 2002, been the person to sing the national anthem in front of 1,000 people. I've got to get the name right of the of who it is, of the Kiwanis Special Games. So she's not afraid of an audience. There you go. I invited her to sing today. I don't know if that's going to happen. and then finally, Carla Javits, to my right, is the president and CEO of Red F. And Red F is working with a population through, based in San Francisco, providing equity-like investments in organizations whose mission are really to help people get a foothold in the workforce. In a variety of ways, and then move forward from there. So we'll hear about that. And a very interesting fact about Carla is that she has an AA degree, so related, in hotel and restaurant management from San Francisco City College. So we figured out today that she might have served lunch to Judy during that time. So to somebody's point here, everybody, it's all connected, and here we all are. You never know who you might have seen before. So anyway, so we'll jump in. So first, thank you, Linda, for that context. I think it's helpful for everybody to kind of get grounded in what we're doing here, which is learning and then moving forward to how we might deploy that learning in the form of a grant. So we're really excited to have you all here. You are our dream panel for this topic. So we thought it would be helpful if you, Steve, could start us off with some context and some definitions, kind of big picture, what we're talking about today, and how you define even a middle wage job and a high wage job versus a low wage job, and what sectors and jobs might enable people to have greater economic mobility. Upward mobility.
My agreement with Lisa is I get to do it my way. Visualize a train. It has 3 cars. The back car has what are today's low-wage jobs. You can figure out what the next 2 cars have. They have the middle and the higher-wage jobs. A career pathway is a trail onto and through the cars. It is a journey with multiple beginnings, which gives you all incredible opportunities to intervene, and endings that are as yet undetermined. But the idea for me as an economist who works on mobility is that you concentrate on the movement, on helping people move along on the journey without at the beginning getting wrapped up in where they end up. most people that I interact with have their heart and their passion, and for you, your pocketbooks on helping people get onto the back car and move through the back car, the low-wage car. I don't, okay? My cryptic day job that I've been doing for 50 years is as a regional economist to large public agencies, where when we talk about regional prosperity, we mean everybody. It includes the people that you care about, but it includes everybody else. And in my volunteer work, I serve on the public sector workforce board that provides employment and training and networking services to everybody in San Mateo and Santa Clara County. And we also concentrate on everybody. I'm supposed to be the numbers person. So there are about 1 million jobs in each car. In the place where we are, there are a few more jobs in the high-wage car than in any of the other cars, but it's pretty equal. I told you what the good news is. There are multiple places to help people. Here's the other news. It's 2017. Pick any year in the future, there will be more people in the low-wage car, in low-wage occupations than there are now. Just take it to the bank. That is, there'll be more people in restaurants, there'll be incredibly more people in what are pretty low-wage jobs in personal care and in healthcare support, helping an aging population. The number of people in today's low-wage jobs will grow. That means not everybody's going to get the middle-wage jobs. And many millions of people in this region will not. So we want to help them. We're going to do something else. The second piece of other news is that there aren't that many job openings in the middle-wage car. Okay? The job openings that are there from growth are in construction and healthcare. You don't need an economist, distinguished or otherwise, to tell you that. But most of the job openings in the middle car are from people who are retiring. So all of the people who are thinking about the great new niche jobs and everybody's going to be in advanced manufacturing and they're going to be computer coders are not helping the people you want to help, who will be replacing government workers and office workers and truckers and carpenters and plumbers and all the people that aren't fancy. Most of the middle wage jobs aren't fancy. I'm a fan of Judy's, and we'll get into the major interventions later, but I'll leave you with a couple of points. The thing that actually helped me most in my first job was I worked with a man who later became my partner but was my mentor. It's not preschool. It's not the community college. It's not an apprenticeship. But it is, for many people, mentoring, building alumni groups of people in middle wage jobs who can help mentor people move down that trail is an incredibly effective and low-cost policy. I'm a fan of Judy's. They are the largest post-secondary center of opportunity in the state. Okay, what is it, a couple of million?
2.1 million students at 114 colleges.
Right. Some, like Judy's, are moving forward, some, she'll tell you, are struggling. But that's not the only pathway to the middle. There are licenses, there are apprenticeships, there are occupations that have training that's outside any of this. It doesn't need college. And there are a lot of pathways to the middle that require experience and skills. So the last point is a pathway is a journey. For those of you that follow track and field, it's not a broad jump where you start at one end of the pit and you take a giant leap and you end at the other end of the pit. No silver bullets, nothing's fast. It's a journey in space and a journey in time. Some patience for that will help your grant making.
Thank you. So Judy and then Carla, could you each add anything else you'd like to that context, and even defining numbers of, how you might define the middle and low and high
If you want
range?
that,
Yeah.
okay, when we did a $500,000 HUD study on mobility, and so at that time, $18 and less was low wage. It might be 20 now, but most of those people were working for less than $14 an hour. High was maybe over 35. I don't know what it would be now. Those are the professionally accepted ranges. I don't know whether that and a nickel is worth more than a nickel, but that's the ranges we work.
Great, thank you. Great.
Well, I actually want to abandon what I was originally going to say, and that was to give you a certain amount of data on those areas that we've identified have a great many positions filled right now. We'll have a certain annual demand that far exceeds the number of students coming out of the community colleges. The reason why I want to abandon that piece for the time that I'm allotted is to actually amplify something that Steve is saying to you about the work that we need to do in order to genuinely create economic mobility. So the community colleges represent the most diverse as well as the largest sector of higher education. So when you think about individuals who come to us, and very often people may think, well, it's only the lower middle class or people who can't get into elite institutions, it's really missing how incredibly diverse by way of age, ethnicity, socioeconomic background, academic preparedness. I mean, we're proud of the fact that, De Anza College had somebody who went on to win the Nobel Prize in chemistry. Mm-hmm. That probably doesn't happen a lot, and people wouldn't necessarily think that somebody would have gotten their start in a community college and gone on to be that distinguished and academically accomplished. So our jobs and what we really devote ourselves to is, in a sense, how do we come up with interventions that can customize what we need to do, whether it's around transfer education or workforce education. And really, transfer is just another form of workforce education when you think about it, because unless you don't have to work for a living, our students are going to want to go on to get a baccalaureate and a master's and a doctorate, or certifications that are short of even 2 years with us, in order to be in the workforce. So I think what I'd want you to have as a takeaway for the role of the community colleges and why we're so important to economic mobility, the world of work is changing in ways we cannot even begin to imagine. If you read The Rise of the Robots, there's certainly prediction a whole bunch of jobs will go away in very short order as a function of artificial intelligence. And so that we're maybe training people that just will not have a living wage or middle wage in something that would be the result of the education that they're getting from us, or even the four-year universities. Foothill De Anza, and I think a great many of our community colleges are really rethinking what is our role in terms of education. And I think we really have come up with the right role for us, given the changing nature, that we owe it to our students to provide them with foundational skills that are not strictly limited to first job out of college. We want to respond, in fact, to what we're hearing from business and industry, that they are getting graduates who can't write, who can't necessarily read, They aren't team players. They're lacking creativity. They're not showing up for work on time. I just heard this yesterday at the select committee on the study of the master plan for higher education. It's like, my gosh, what is happening to the world of employment? So the best thing that we can do for our students is, again, provide these very basic foundational skills. They're often referred to as soft skills. They're hard. They're hard to achieve and to keep up and to perfect. And so for us, all of the technical skills that we certainly need to provide our students to have some basis for being hired into a particular area really then need to be accompanied by what we probably would all say we purport to do in general education courses. And so again, the reading and writing skills, the quantitative literacy that one would need to have. And we also hope that our students are going to leave us with a sense of civic responsibility, that there will be some character development and moral development when they are with us about being good persons in the world. This is the difference between education and training. So if you just want to code, hey, you can go somewhere and learn that. If you want to be in the world as someone who is going to make a difference and who's going to give back, because you are privileged by virtue of having an education, whether it's through us or anywhere else. And my own personal philosophy is that creates a sense of responsibility that you need to do. And that's part of what I've devoted my life to do in giving the hand up for those who may not have envisioned themselves as even being capable of that, and having them think that they really can escape the cycle of poverty. The students that we see have often been in domestic violence situations. They have been in foster care. They are very much like Carla's population of having been incarcerated. The housing insecurity and food insecurity has grown for our students, so we need to take that into account as well. So the totality of the experiences that we are hopefully giving them that then allow them to go out in the world is actually more important to us than what may be there for some of the numbers around the employability. But what I think in doing the right thing does mean they will be employable, and they will be highly desirable to business and industry. And I think we are seeing that by virtue of the great jobs that our students get upon leaving us, that even in times when the market may be saturated with an area like dental hygiene students, we're offering one of the first baccalaureates in the community colleges this June. 52 years of that program, we have 100% pass rate on national licensure exams, and they're competing with students who come out of four-year universities. I think we're doing something right, and I think there are a lot of things that are going right in the community colleges that are doing some very serious self-assessment about the high dropout rate often that we get accused of, or the lack of transfer. So how do we fix that? And that it really is on us and not our students. So let me just leave you with that, so then Carla has a chance
Think
to
about
say
it. Okay, so Carla, we're in the sort of context and
Yes,
definition
yes.
setting
I'll
here.
just a couple of quick thoughts. I think sometimes what gets lost in the rush that a lot of people take when they come into this, to take that long jump that Steve mentioned into high wage jobs, the pathway upward, and we want living wage jobs. I think what gets lost there sometimes is just the basic value of working. That there's a value to the individual, there's a value to our society in terms of their talents and et cetera, and there's a multi-generational, obviously, impact when your parent works on your ability then to get through education and other things. So there's a lot of benefit to working. And when you survey low-wage workers, and I've read some of these surveys, often the results say that they're more concerned about security than they are about the level of wages and benefits that they're getting paid. And so I think a few things we could think about are how to make the low-wage jobs better. If there are going to be lots more jobs in that front of the caboose?
The train, the front of the train. And it's
What's the
engine's
last
probably
part
there.
called? The caboose, I think.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of ways to do that in terms of, not shifting your hours all the time, having decent management, et cetera, et cetera. We can talk more about that. Second, I think we can consider approaches that make public assistance a better supplement to work rather than sort of one or the other. People talk about using public assistance as more of an incentive to work. We actually see a lot of people just making choices. They don't really have to have a big incentive. They just need to not have a disincentive to work, which is what a lot of our public programs provide now. And then lastly, I think I would just mention, kind of to build on what you said earlier, that some people think about technology, for example, just in terms of coding, or we need to teach people how to do high-level technological jobs. But the reality is that a lot of these low-wage jobs that Steve is talking about, they're going to require two things. One is an ability to interface with technology. That doesn't necessarily mean sophisticated technological skills, but you have to be comfortable interfacing with technology, even at very low wage, relatively low skill jobs. And then second, an ability to deal with people, have some people skills. And those are not, necessarily things you need a PhD, for, but they have to be taught. So these soft skills and, the ability to show up on time and things like that. So we can get more into it, but I think at a high level, I just wanted to emphasize the value of work and what we can do to make even low-wage work much better from the perspective of society, the people employed, and their families and children.
As I listen to everyone sharing some of their early jobs, I mean, some of these things are, maybe it wasn't your favorite job, but there were things you were learning or empathy you were developing that would come into play, it's clear. So let's move on to kind of what some of the pathways are to move through this train, to move as far forward in it, and how they serve different populations. So who would like to start?
I'd be happy to offer an example that I find really impressive. And some of you may know the program Year Up, which started in Boston in 2000. And Foothill offers credit for the 6 months that the students go through the training before they go into a 6-month fully paid internship at one of the companies in San Francisco or in Silicon Valley. And the results from that program in the past 17 years that it's been around and their expansion into probably 18 cities now is really phenomenal. So it's urban youth ages 18 to 24. Any given cohort of 30 to 40 students is probably 90 to 95% students of color. They go through a screening process to see sort of, what are the challenges that they've overcome and what is the potential that they have given all the support that Year Up provides them, because everything is free for them. The schooling is free. They need to dress professionally as they come to class every day. And if they can't afford a business suit, they will be provided with them. They will be provided with bus vouchers if they need transportation to get to there. And so the kind of sense of community and confidence that they build up and the readiness they then have to go into places like eBay and Facebook and Google and Bank of America and Kaiser Permanente, and the poise and confidence that they demonstrate after, it's just amazing when you think about it, 6 months but very rigorous training. They do get a stipend to help them because there are obviously opportunity costs that they're in class rather than working. But the feedback that they get from employers is really pretty remarkable. I'm on the national board for Year Up, and we had our summit in Chicago last month, and there was a vice president from Bank of America who talked about how they used to require a baccalaureate degree for people in their customer service centers. And with their experience of Year Up students who were just, again, so dependable, and this kind of eye-opening experience for them, that individuals who are coming with minimal training, but again, the work ethic that really mattered, and that sense of customer service and the interpersonal relation skills that they had built. they said they're not going to do that anymore. They don't need to have a baccalaureate. It's a different way of looking at what is the skill set that a student or a prospective employee would need, and really how to begin to test for that, as opposed to assuming that it's just the degree. And in fact, the context setting for us at that meeting was a report out of Harvard on what's now being called degree inflation, that so many more employers are looking to the baccalaureate degree when they don't really need it, but it's a response to a dissatisfaction with kind of the skill set and the work readiness and the work performance of individuals, thinking, well, I didn't require a baccalaureate before, but maybe I need it now. And, you know, we may even see that with master's degrees in the future. So I think what Europe has been able to do, and the relationships it's developed with business and industry who can say, this is really working and this is a model that we want to support, is, again, a very good pathway for those individuals. And they are prepared to be able to go on. So when you think about stackable credentials that could be there, the opportunities that they have with additional education that they can get and the experience that they're getting within the companies can certainly lead to other promotional opportunities.
So I want to come back to what's happening at the community colleges, but Steve, I think you wanted to share something.
3 examples, 2 of which might be right in your wheelhouse. When we did our study, obviously, English language and English language facility was one of the barriers that many low-wage workers identified. There are 2 efforts on the peninsula that I know enough about to be dangerous. One is the Building Skills Partnership, where they work with people in the building maintenance industry with the cooperation of the employer to help them learn both English that's related to the job and something that helps them move up in the industry. The second is a group of hotels in San Mateo County that are working with the union and the employers to help people who clean rooms and have low-wage jobs move up. The key I have learned is what's called contextualized learning, so that the people who are busy and struggling to raise a family and keep a job learn English in a contextual setting that's directly related to their job and to what will help them move up. There may be other opportunities for that. That's one of the barriers. The other piece, again, connecting people at the beginning of the journey to employers, are these high school academies and internships with employers. Different concept of a first job. And I don't know whether that's in your funding capability, but it is one of the definite steps to get to people early enough so that they see the connection between what they're doing in school and the possibility of getting a job.
Thank you. Let's go to Carlin, and I do want to have a little background on the overall community college.
Yeah, well, you know, I think as we went around the room, it was quite clear, you need to have a job in order to figure out what you do and don't want to do, and in order to move up and move on. You have to start with something. Otherwise, you can't move up. So you got to get in the door somewhere. So I would say we have focused largely on young people who are out of school and out of work, even maybe a little more trouble than some of the people even that a year up, which is an incredible program, helps. People whose education has really failed, who may even have a high school degree, but read and do math at a 4th grade level, which is what we've seen over and over again. People who've been incarcerated. Sadly, 1 out of 15 working age adults in the United States has a felony conviction on their record. That always startles people. It startled me when I looked at the numbers. If you add in, as we know, the opioid epidemic, epidemics of drug addiction, mental health issues that have been going on for quite some time, we're talking about, unfortunately, we just did this analysis, roughly 10 million people nationally. We've hit on something that can scale and that has an evidence base behind it that works to engage these particular people in the workforce. And we call that employment social enterprise. It's essentially a combination of a job, a real job, wage-paid employment, that also offers support. So whether that's childcare, whether that's financial management, whether that's dealing with transportation or other issues, you get connected to that. And then management is sensitive to the fact that you may not have the soft skills to show up on time or deal properly with conflict, that you may have a history of trauma and violence, and so you may need a different way of coaching in order to make you successful. People get those jobs in a supportive work environment, and then they are encouraged, in some cases required, to move on into competitive employment with some period of support afterwards so that they can be more successvel. So it's sort of, I've called it, those of you who like baseball, just finished watching the last night, kind of a farm team, if you will. It's a place, people can kind of get their feet under them, learn in a supportive environment that's meant to encourage their success, not cut them out because they're not being successful. And as we know, when you get into a low-wage job, it can be a tough environment, so you need to be really well prepared. People really need, businesses more and more are hungry, as we just talked about, for well-prepared workers, and they're not finding them even in the front line. So we're actually finding a hunger for these well-prepared individuals that, in a sense, have been de-risked by their time in a social enterprise. It's kind of a modern-day version of on-the-job training. The good thing about it is a lot of these companies, all the ones we work with, are selling some sort of product or service to the market, and so they're making a lot of revenue, which means the costs to philanthropy or government or subsidy, whatever that may be, are much lower than it would typically be for a regular kind of job training, workforce training program. We've done a very large-scale evaluation. We're doing another one. We found wages up by 268%. We found 33% more people in a job a year later than the same kind of people who had gotten traditional job training services. We found a social return on investment of $2.23 for every dollar spent by the companies, because people are paying taxes, less dependent on government benefits, and the program itself costs a little bit less. We've helped roughly 25,000 people to date get these jobs. We've helped to create an industry, if you will, in California that is chunking out consistently roughly 5,000 people every year. We're trying to get that up to much higher numbers, of course, as we can talk about later. There's a lot going on actually around career pathways in this environment. I don't want to go on too long, but I'd love to get into some of that in a minute, because there are a lot of really neat examples, I think, of that.
Well, good. I think maybe what we'll do is move to the next question, and I think in one of these contexts we can hear about the broader community colleges. So let's talk about obstacles. We know that this is not easy work. As you said, Judy, the soft skills are hard, as an example, but that's just one. Could you talk about what some of those real obstacles are, either on the personal level for the individuals on these pathways, or for all the players in the ecosystem trying to help make those happen, to move through the train cars, again, to use Steve's analogy. Carla, do you want to start with that?
Okay, sure. I mean, there are a lot of, obviously, we've already spoken about some of the obstacles. You have a history of incarceration. Many employers just won't hire you, period. Even with ban the box, so some people call that move the box, because, you still have a record. If they don't want to hire you with a record, you're sort of out. If you have a history of homelessness, you're likely to have a big gap in your resume. It doesn't look too good. What does that mean? You have an experience of trauma. You understand street skills, but you don't understand work skills. And so, survival is very different in those two environments. Transportation is a huge issue, trying to get to where the jobs are at some sort of affordable cost. There's a challenge, in the jobs themselves. Hours change, there's a lack of opportunity to skill up that's offered by many employers for their frontline. They may offer it to their high level, but not to their frontline. So those are a lot of the obstacles. I did just want to reference here, and then I will stop, a couple of things that are happening that I think are really interesting in this area, because we have very good data on the fact that people can get a job in social enterprise and stay in the workforce. But we were all troubled by the fact that people's wages are still so low. So what more can we do? How can we really help? And there's a number of things going on, really interesting. There's a group called the Center for Employment Opportunities that just opened up here, but they're from New York. They're in about 6 states now. They're helping lots of people who come directly out of incarceration, immediately get a job on their work crew, and then move on into employment. What they did was they partnered up with community college, and they said, all right, if you make it through successfully and you stabilize yourself, we're going to have a little cohort where you'll be with the people that you're comfortable with, and we'll brush up your skills from a 4th grade level to an 8th grade level of reading and math, so that you can get a certification in HVAC repair, or whatever a middle skill job certificate would require. And then they connect you with community college, and they try to help you keep your job at the same time as you get your certificate. So that's one example. I'd offer as another interesting example, apropos what Steve said, a really neat social enterprise in Denver called the Women's Bean Project. They employ a lot of women coming out of prison, homelessness, etc. And they put in a component which was very intentionally a mentorship program. And interestingly, they picked out mentors who were women who were senior in their careers and had been on the talent management side, the HR side. And so once they were paired up with one of these women, they had a lot of resources and understanding of where other jobs might be. And they went from, I think, something like a 60 or 70% placement rate to 100% placement rate in jobs following the social enterprise position because of the mentorship connection. There are also some of these enterprises that you can't run a business and have only transitional employees. So many have full-time jobs that actually are paid quite well. And many of the people, once they get that frontline job, move into management. We have a company up in Seattle called Orion Industries that actually makes airplane parts for Boeing. Well, you walk in the door, you don't start making an airplane wing, thank goodness, but you're cleaning the floor. But if you prove yourself, you can move up and move into one of those positions. So there's more. I don't want to go on and on, but there are a lot of ways to kind of fit these pieces together better so that you can have a job and skill up at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Steve?
If your focus is helping people get on the train and move through the first car, Carol's got it nailed. You remember at the beginning when I said that's not my focus. Once you think about that journey ending in the middle car or the high wage car, then you need to care about those people. The simplest numerical example is that if there are a relatively limited number of middle wage jobs, a pathway for the middle wage workers into the top car is what opens up more openings. You cannot double the amount of people in those jobs. If you go broader, and Lisa gave me permission to rag on you a little, an economy that is not prosperous at the end has no money for community colleges, has less money for Medicaid, has little money for education, has very little money for social services. And so if for no other reason, social venture folks like you need to be interested in all parts of the train and all parts of mobility. In my world about housing, which I understood was your deal last year, my biggest barrier is that the people with the heart and the passion for people in the first car don't get how it's related to the total. And they think they can just work on poor people without any indication that, for example, for housing, probably 1 out of 9 new units at the most might be below market rate housing. And so if you only care about that one, you can do that. But if you care about housing for teachers or nurses or firefighters or police officers, they're not eligible. And so you need to be worried about the whole deal. But just remember, if the middle wage car doesn't open up through retirements or moving up, you got nothing. You got nothing.
Thank you. Sobering. Judy, would you like to talk about, again, we're focused on obstacles, but also sharing a little bit about kind of what's happening in the community colleges?
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk a little bit about that. So we have an effort that we're referring to as California's Strong Workforce, so that there is a great focus on the education that students need to go into the emerging sectors. And I think the point that I'd like to make about this, that in a sense is new, we are using so many more data points than we ever have before. So I think the wealth of information that we do have by way of labor market data, the projections as to where the jobs will be in our respective service areas, because obviously for those of us serving Silicon Valley, and we're part of the Bay Area Community College Consortium that has 28 colleges going as far north as Santa Rosa and as far south as Monterey Peninsula, the kinds of work preparation that we would offer will be very different from those who are in the Inland Empire or the most rural colleges in the state. So there's a recognition we need to pay attention to where our students are and where the jobs are for them, assuming that there's a certain amount of mobility that would be there physically, but sometimes not a lot. We're not going to get a lot of people moving here from Shasta County, and hopefully they are going to be able to get jobs in their immediate area that will help them. So we really do have some wonderful opportunities to think about. It's not just the feel-good moments that we'll be looking at, but to actually have data on whether or not we are making a difference and more students are being employed, and whether or not they're moving into the various cars on that train. So I thought I'd just share 2 examples of how we are using this wealth of data for making some important decisions about what we do on the ground with our students. So there is a employment outcomes survey data that we are able to look at by various sectors. And there was one college that had appeared in an example for a recent conference that we had, where early childhood education was the most frequent job that students were getting out of this particular college. But in looking at the data on the wages, there were only 22% of that set of graduates that would be in what Steve would describe as middle wages. The data that are now present allowed that college to look at how they stood in the midst of other institutions that had early childhood education programs. I hadn't picked this one out, but it happened that Foothill College has 46% of its graduates in early childhood education, and we know that that can be a tough area, and 46% is pretty good. That was kind of at the top of the list for any early childhood education programs. So that led to discussions about, so what's going on and what is happening? And it isn't just because wages might be a little higher here, because this again would be an institution that is in the general Bay Area. But that's so important for us to be sharing best practices and sharing the learnings that we have, so that it's not about 28 colleges independently trying to figure this out. And I'll talk more about the advantages of regionalism later. The other example that I wanted to share with you about how the data are really helping us move in this direction of really doing much better by our students has to do with the medical assisting program at Cabrillo College. So they were looking at the data and seeing, well, it's interesting that our graduates are employed, but only 25% of them were in the medical assisting field. And they thought, so what is going on here? As they worked with their employers, what they learned, and nobody had ever told them this before, it was an interesting way of describing it. You're training your students for the lower end of the job description. And we have needed students that are coming out with a higher set of skills and more advanced education, and so they're leaving if they don't have that because they're not getting promotional opportunities, or they are competing with others who have come in. That was really important because then it did mean a total revamping of the curriculum in order to serve that population well, including the employers, because it isn't just about the students. And it goes back to Steve's point. If we're not helping the development of the job opportunities and making them truly in service of our communities, then we really do have a lot of other problems that are bigger than just affecting the individual students.
So disconnects between all the different parts of this ecosystem really need to be examined, and the data can be helpful. So I'd like to move on to the question of kind of what the key levers are. We've done this in our other sessions, and after this we're going to move in after we have some Q&A from all of you, so do be thinking of your questions. The opportunity to think about where the key levers are, and some of them you've mentioned, Steve mentioned mentoring, and some other things. So as you look into the next 3 to 5 years, what do you consider, each of you, to be the kind of the most promising approaches or areas that could enable the most people to move forward? Steve.
Okay. The two key levers you've either talked about or can't do anything about. One is preschool education. No child is ever doomed to failure, although adults may have a lot of barriers. Okay? And the second, if you're true about middle wage jobs, is making it possible for unauthorized immigrants to earn and learn. They are the largest group by incredibly far of people who have the potential to move up. But more practically, for you, it's the mentoring. And so if your deal is incarcerated folks, Carol may have done this already. I'd get an alumni group of incarcerated folks who could talk to the new people about the soft skills, about what you need. It's a low-cost area. For English, I'd go with a contextualized learning thing. Both of those bring the experience of people who actually are dealing with employers into the program, so we're not guessing that the learning, in this case English, that goes on meets the needs of the workers but also of the employers. I think those are very practical things that you all might find opportunities in.
Thank you. Carla.
I mean, I guess the thing, look, parochially, I think investing in social enterprise growth and development is an evidence-based approach that helps people get into the workforce and connects people to the kinds of mentorship, support, and educational opportunities they need to move on and move up. And I mean, we see a hunger to do this. The millennial generation is very interested in this. We have way more people coming to us for help with advisory services and growth capital than we can possibly meet the demand. We could be doing this explosively higher levels in California right now with more resources to invest. So I would cite that, number one. I think some of this work, and perhaps it's in the policy area around the Earned Income Tax Credit, which is a terrific program, has been modestly expanded in California, is we don't know what's gonna happen in the new tax bill, so it's a good moment for it. There are a lot of organizations working on this. United Way is, is a player in this area. There are others. These are public benefits that actually provide an incentive to work and deal with the fact that people who make low wages may need some supplement to their income so they can afford housing in a place like this. And there are other larger, I think, longer-term challenges with other public programs, and there are many good groups doing work on it, where we really need to begin to turn the tide on, that they are sort of make you make a choice between working or being on public assistance, which is just so short-sighted. We're never going to dig our ways out of this. And I know universal basic income is a big topic here in the Valley, and I'm not deep into it, but I guess from my point of view, things that are about encouraging people to work and then have a decent income is a better way to go than just giving people, the money to live. And then lastly, to the extent that you can, and I think this is less about your money, frankly, and more about your personal leverage, I think that companies can do much, much more to invest in the training and upskilling of their workforce at all levels. I agree with Steve. It's not just for the front, it should be for the front line, which is done very little, but it needs to be for the middle to move up. And, we have a strategy in Seattle, for example, that we're working on we're calling backfill to upskill. And so these are good companies that are trying to invest in their workforce. They're upskilling people. Great. Then let's backfill those positions with well-prepared people who can get on the train along with them. So to whatever extent you can use your personal leverage within your companies to encourage more investment in the front line and the middle around upskilling, I think the better. And there are some companies that are starting, companies I think have shied away or gone away from that partly because people change jobs. So they're like, look, the person's not going to stay with me. Why should I do this? But we've seen more in retail, I know right now, kind of business associations in a field that are coming together to say, look, let's all do this. Even if people move around within the field, at least, we have a better trained workforce that can benefit all of us.
That's great. Judy?
So I'll share with you where we're placing our 3 bets as an organization. One is that as a community college district, we're on a P20 continuum, and I was really happy to see the slide that was setting the context for us earlier that acknowledged that you've got education going on for a whole lot of years. But we're not in a silo, and it is really important for us to be intentional and purposeful about the contributions that we can make to our allies, our feeders, our receiving institutions, and how do we do that in a very specific way? Because it's easy to say, yeah, we're part of it. So we have a Stretch to Kindergarten program, and so we provide a summer program for children who have not had the benefit of preschool, who are already behind before they go to kindergarten, and these are students of color. So we're part of an effort with that through our Family Engagement Institute. We have a middle college. We have STEM camps for children in middle school. We're increasing our relationships with our feeder school districts, and even those that aren't necessarily in our district area, but Eastside Prep has such a fantastic track record for moving students on to 4-year institutions, but we're replacing their AP classes with credit courses offered by Foothill College that give those students a better chance of transferring the credits and actually preparing them better than a test does. I mean, I do have to speak on behalf of that in terms of, I think, an educational experience. And even the farther end of what we do, we have an incredible program called the Krause Center for Innovation, which provides technological training for K-12 teachers. So they come, we do fundraising for that, so it's free to them. We support teams of teachers so they can think about the infusion of technology in their classrooms, that will lead to better results for teaching and learning. So these are spaces that we have carved out for ourselves, saying it's not just we're offering classes, but how do we live in the larger ecosystem that is going to be so important for some integration of that work across what we do. And there'll certainly be more things that are coming up around adult basic education. Regionalism is becoming more and more important. And as we think about the work that we can do, and again, this kind of division of labor, that we're not trying to replicate everything that everybody else is doing because it's popular, it's in demand, there may be a lot of students in the area, but what are the pieces that we can carve out and then partner with the other community colleges in our area? And that's actually kind of a forced collaboration to some degrees, given the way some of the funding is working. But it has worked out better than many of us had thought. And so I think that's really important. One example that I'm very happy about, some of you may have heard about the College Promise and the recent legislation that had been signed by the governor to make the first year free for first-time full-time students. Well, a number of us have launched our own promises in advance of AB 19, but under the leadership of Sam Liccardo, we're talking about a Silicon Valley College Promise that will bring together Foothill De Anza, West Valley Mission, and San Jose Evergreen to share some tasks, if you will, but to also articulate a kind of brand for the opportunities that would be particular to the 6 colleges that make up those 3 districts. And again, there's a way of leveraging some of that so that the impact really can be broader and deeper than if we were going it alone. So I think those kinds of efforts are really, really important. And finally, being again mindful of where we sit in that intersection of education, business, and government. Because we're a public institution, it matters immensely what is going on in Sacramento, and now even more so what is going on in Washington, D.C. So for us to be able to articulate in alliances with business and industry, is there regulatory relief that we need in some places to be able to move forward? That has been an area that we've paid some attention to. Are there some tax incentives for business and industry to want to partner with us in certain ways? So if it is around paid internships or apprenticeships or other kinds of work experiences that can be in their interest from an economic basis, to further incentivize them to work with us. We're very interested in that as well. We're paying attention to the tax reform bills that would be coming out of Washington, D.C. So it's, again, being present and being purposeful in a lot of venues that we may have not thought about before, because kind of the tradition was, gee, we're community colleges and we can just sort of, pay attention to the local. And actually, we have one of the largest international student programs because it matters for us around our educational philosophy of the broadest experiences for our students. But we also hope that we might actually be exporting a little bit of democratic ideals to the students who come to us. So the 3,000 students who come to us from other countries are a really important part of the work that we do as well. So we think of our place in the world too. So.
Thank you, each of you, Carla and Judy and Steve. Fascinating, and I can only imagine that this really interesting group assembled here has some good questions. So this is your chance to ask a few. I'm going to let Judy.
And I'll identify questioners, and
Yeah.
Lisa will repeat questions.
Yeah,
So
so you can all hear.
John.
Hi. First of all, wow. Thank you all. What a tremendous exposure and disclosure of your efforts and your, more importantly, your background and thought processes and your efforts. So thank you very much. I want to hear more about the emphasis on EQ, not IQ, or how to code.
Yeah.
So important. But with respect to positions and jobs, you mentioned Orion in Seattle, but in terms of the types of jobs that provide, Mr. Levy, the kinds of positions that actually provide ladder opportunities for people that are starting off the first car, but you see, I think sometimes I hire contractors to do work, yard work, housework. And these are people with very poor educations but are managing a business and a group of people and a schedule and their accounting. But they're stuck there. So what kinds of positions, opportunities actually provide these laddership opportunities?
I'm going to repeat the question so everyone can hear. First of all, there was a wow there. I want to point that out. And an interest in EQ versus just IQ. And jumping into the very specific question of the types, the IQ, the EQ, thank you, emotional quotient. So emotional intelligence as opposed to just the thank you. I'm usually the queen of the acronym translation services, so on the team, Mark. So the types of jobs that provide, I like this term laddership versus I think of leadership, but so a way up, opportunities that may not be available to people who are very capable in contract positions, for example, but where there isn't necessarily a way forward to higher paying jobs. Who would like to try that?
So I'll give you the researchers answer. Numerically, healthcare, because you have institutions like Kaiser who are interested in helping people move up and have a variety of positions. At our state workforce board, the healthcare people are very interested in ladders. So numerically, that's where the largest number of middle wage jobs and new middle wage jobs will be. Second is construction and the whole idea of apprenticeships and journeymen and moving up. It's also the largest numerical source of replacements, plus it's a growth area. Those are two big areas. Government actually is the third area where people progress, and there's a lot of retirements at the top, whether you're a beginning firefighter and you move up. Those are the three big numerical areas. I heard you talk a little bit about contractors. So you've got the tech companies, you can weigh on them, they're beginning to understand that they want to treat the contractors as employees and build pathways. I think that is an area of potentially political leverage there.
I might just add that for the specific example that you offered of the folks that have been working for you, and you said they don't have a lot of education, but they're managing a business. A lot of our colleges have courses in entrepreneurship so that they could help people who have just a real passion for doing a certain kind of work, and they'd like to have some tools for advancing in that, perhaps growing their business and maybe even moving from the doing to managing other workers. And that's, I think, a wonderful opportunity that could get them on that train.
I think just on a practical level, one thing I'd observe might be moving from smaller companies to larger companies. They may be in the same sector, but larger companies often can pay more. Moving from non-union to union, kind of obvious, another pathway. And in a general sense, people are looking to upskill and hire those who are, well prepared and have experience. And so, you had mentioned earlier, sort of connecting all of this is part of the problem we've had. It's very disconnected, very disparate, and that, really admire everything you're doing with the community college system, because that's so important. These systems have been too segmented.
Mm-hmm.
And so you start over here and you can never go there because these people aren't talking. So in many places, LA notably, we've done something to bring the employers together with the social enterprises, with the workforce system. So when you start somewhere, you actually know how to go from point A to point B. A lot of people don't. There's no connectivity. And I did just want to reference your EQ question, because I thought it was a great question, just with a little anecdote, because I think it's just a great example. There's a young man who was working in retail with one of our companies, and he had a dissatisfied customer in front of him. And he had learned really well what to say. His words were good. He knew how to say what he had to say. But his supervisor was watching him. And as he was interacting with this individual, he took a step toward them. And so the supervisor pulled him aside afterwards and said, "Your words were great. In a street context, take a step in, you won't get killed. But in a store context, take a step back because you're threatening the customer." And I just thought it was such a subtle thing, but it's about emotional intelligence. And it's something you can't really learn in a classroom. You need to learn on the job, but there needs to be a mentor or a supportive person there who tuned into you, who can, speak to you about it and then help you. And that could be a career derailer, ultimately, and so that I just wanted to, as an example.
Back to the contextual learning
Yeah.
related. So how about another
Time
question?
for a couple more? Craig?
So I'd love to hear some comments from a policy perspective, perhaps economics and otherwise. Because you talk about how do we make more opportunities with those middle cars to allow everyone to move forward. I mean, trickle up, trickle down. I mean, what are your recommendations from a policy standpoint? We may not be able to influence it directly, but indirectly we may have some influence there.
So the question was, how might you recommend forward movement in the policy context? How can policy help move that forward? And we may or may not be able to affect that directly, but we welcome your comments. Steve?
Well, in the regional prosperity strategy, there were 3 points that came out. One is nothing works if you don't have a growing economy. 2, there's the bucket we've talked about today, everywhere from pre-K to mentoring with the community colleges being a huge piece. But the third piece is what Carol alluded to, that if you care about the people who are going to remain in the low-wage car for much or most of their life, then you're thinking about health insurance, which has been the biggest boost to their income, Medicaid in California. You're talking about the Earned Income Tax Credit. You may be talking about spreading unionization or apprenticeships to other areas, but those people are not going to move up, and yet you don't want to say because they can't move up, they're not important in a policy. Grow the economy, educate where you can, and help the people that remain behind.
Thank
How
you.
about Mark and then Lisa? And
Well,
then
I don't know if
maybe-
anybody wanted to quickly add.
No, that's
Okay.
that's fine.
All right, great.
Just a quick question. How big a problem is it and what is being done to address it of connecting the persons with the need with the resources that are available?
A very good question of how is the connecting between the people and the resources going? Is that going well? Is there a problem? What are the challenges?
I think I would just chime in repeating the challenges around the disconnect. That it is so much more challenging than it ought to be. Finding out where the resources are, can they help particular populations? Because the needs are so huge. And in some cases too, you have the challenges of the individuals who may not identify that they need the services that you want them to get. And so sometimes the kind of the selling of the services that they should take advantage of is another part of that as well.
Steve?
Get them to their American Job Center in the public workforce system in San Mateo and Santa Clara County. I don't have anything to do with that, but we're excellent. That's our job. We have counselors. We have people that connect them to the resources. Barry Hathaway, I don't know whether you guys funded the Stride Center,
We did.
We did. They were our grantee last year.
Right.
Yep.
is now come down to run the Opportunity Center in East Palo Alto, the
Job
Southern San
training,
Mateo one. He's part of our system. It's not a miracle, but if you're talking about connecting people and helping them get connected, get them into the public job centers.
But I'm
I
hearing that there's, sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I just wanted to add, I mean, I think the institutions and some of the people sometimes don't connect because the people face a number of obstacles in trying to connect. And so I think we understate sometimes the granular nature of that. And so some investment in the support that's required, like a lot of the community colleges, for example, have done specialized kind of ombuds people for veterans who come in. Or some of the job centers actually have people who are better trained in what the obstacles are that the individual faces and attempt to help them get through whatever, train that is. So sometimes that can be under-resourced even though the institution is there. Just the help for some people to actually navigate it and make it through.
Steve?
You had mentioned, and I'm certainly willing to stay after the people have other questions.
I am sure there are more.
Well, and so I know there's a lot of hands. We probably have time for one more, and I did see Lisa's first. So let's let Lisa have the last question here.
Okay, thank you. And again, your work is fantastic. My question is actually about the people who do connect through some of these programs. If you look at the other end of things and trying to move people from one card to another in particular, can you talk some about the work that goes into creating a supportive work environment? I think, Carla, you used that term, but you've all alluded to that. And it seems to me that it's not just what people do themselves or in getting connected, but that there is a huge piece that is around employers and what kind of environment they come in, both from what's being done top down within companies as well as what peer interactions happen. I mean, you look at degree inflation, or that's the kind of thing where even among peers that could become a big issue. And I also look at things like soft skills, where you're attempting to teach soft skills, which are critical, but a lot of people don't realize that they were born into an environment where they're getting those soft skills from day one, throughout their entire lives. And so coming into that whole supportive environment that gives people the runway to work through those issues seems to me to be a huge piece of this. So that's the
Okay, I am going to attempt to summarize that great question, which is what goes into creating a supportive work environment. So this is not talking about connecting to the work environment, but once you're there, what makes for a supportive work environment, both from the top down and the bottom up, and peer, more than bottom up, peer to peer, and considering the soft skill question, and that some people are born into environments where they are learning that from day one, and others are not at all. Who wants to take that?
Carla. Okay, it's kind of the heart, it's the secret sauce, if you will, of social enterprises, I would say. And I just wanted to mention a couple of things because we don't have a lot of time. So I guess I would say what I've seen work is that the social enterprises take this on two fronts. Both, if you will, your traditional human services and behavioral services front. So almost like an EAP plus is how you could think about it. EAP, I'm sorry, being an employee assistance program. You may or may not know you probably have one at your job. But, if you run into problems with mental health or an aging parent or whatever it is, you've got a number you can call and they'll give you some resources. So in a sense, these companies provide that on steroids. You got a deeper problem. Here are resources that you can access to really help you with whatever your specific set of challenges might be. There are definitely peer-to-peer support that's embedded, mentorship, as we discussed earlier, sort of that whole bucket. And then also, and I think this is important, management that's trained differently to really understand. I'm sure you are all reading about this, but the trauma, it changes your brain chemistry, and as you said, you might have grown up in an environment where one set of skills is critical for survival that doesn't work at all in a workplace or an educational environment. And so just knowing what those are and being clued into that isn't going to just happen from a case manager who's helping you with your, mental health problem. It's going to happen on the job. That's why I tried to give the example. So trained managers that really understand where people are coming from so that they can, they can help them. And then the other thing is very small incremental incentives. They found, some of the studies have found, if you just raise salaries a little fast, 15 cents, 10 cents, anything, something quickly, it makes people feel like they're progressing. It incents people. That can also be very positive. And I just wanted to end with another, just an interesting thing that's going on, which I think is really worth paying attention to. There's a company out of Yonkers, New York, called Grayston Bakery. It's been around forever. They make the brownies and your delicious Ben & Jerry's ice cream. And they hooked up, really, and they employ a lot of very troubled people from Yonkers. And they hooked up really early with Ben & Jerry's. And they have what you call an open hiring model. So basically, if you can walk in the door and you say, I can pick up 50 pounds and I'll show up tomorrow, they'll take you on. But you're in sort of a temporary status. And they have to see, do you show up, do you work, what happens, they've set this up. And then if you do well, you can go on, you can work in the bakery, get a decent job, decent benefits, great. So Unilever, as you may or may not know, bought Ben & Jerry's. And now Ben & Jerry's getting interested in this model. And Unilever's kind of interested in this model. So Grayston is actually, we're in talks with them, how could we, in a sense, take the social enterprise approach with all those elements I mentioned and embed them in companies that are hungry for well-prepared talent. And I think there's real potential there. So I think that's really an interesting area.
So clearly, there's so much more to talk about, and I think our panelists can stick around for a little bit after this, but I just wanted to give a great round of applause to each of you.